You to the Florida Chamber's annual Insurance Summit. This 2014 Insurance Summit is going to be a little different than the annual summits that we've had in the past, and I'll explain that. We're expanding the conversation this year to talk about different parts of what's important to Florida's future in the insurance arena. I'm Mark Wilson. I have the privilege of serving as the President and CEO of your Florida Chamber of Commerce. And we're very excited that many of you made cross-country trips to be here. We think what happens in Florida is extremely important to what happens to the future of our nation, and we appreciate you being here. I'd like to ask everybody to stand. It's our tradition to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'd like to ask you to join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for that. Every time I say the pledge, I think of Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, the people will perish. And I just ask you to think about that as we go through the next 2 days, because when we started this 7 years ago, the whole idea that many of you had was that these issues of risk and managing risk and securing Florida's future are so important that if we don't put a long-term strategy together, the other side's always going to win, and we're always going to be playing defense. And so I appreciate the vision that many of you had when you asked us if we would take the lead on this and these issues. Also, I want to recognize 3 people who are here with us today that serve on the Florida Chamber's Board of Directors that help guide policy with the Chamber all year long. Those 3 people, if you would just stand and be recognized. We have Mike Seeley is here from Allstate. We also have Jim Thompson with State Farm, and I believe Steve Weinstein from Renaissance Re. So would you give these guys a round of applause? I think everybody here knows that we started this conference years ago. We started small. And the ideas back then, Don Brown, I think about the wounds that you have from the great work that you did that earned the Florida Chamber's Legislator of the Year. Early on, what we were pushing was certainly not popular, but it was the right thing to do. And we started small, and over the years, I'm not going to tell you that it's popular today, but over the years, we've had some success, one little bit at a time. And my belief in our business is that we can accomplish far more if we work together than we can if we leave here and try to do things separately. And so my ultimate hope for this annual conference is that we leave here with a common set of objectives that we need to get done. What do we need to have happen? What do we need to make sure doesn't happen? And so, Don, I appreciate your leadership with us over the years, and thank all of you, and thank our board for the focus there. I mentioned that this year's summit would be a little different. Let me give a little flavor of what I mean. We have focused almost exclusively on the property insurance crisis that was created several years ago by a former governor. And this year, our members want to talk about health insurance and the crisis that we have there. We also want to talk about medical malpractice, and our members also want to talk about workers' compensation. And so this year, all of those costs of doing business are going to be included one way or another in this conference, and we appreciate that input, and we'll be looking forward to your feedback on what you would want to do differently at future conferences. Before I move forward on the agenda, I want to give a special thanks as Chamber President to some of our staff members. I think everybody here knows David Hart and his team put this together, but there's one person, and that's Faye Brainerd, that this conference just couldn't happen without. And so those of you who are involved in this, you know what I'm talking about. And I can't see where Faye is in the room, but please join me in thanking Faye Brainerd right over here. As Chamber President, I also want to give a little context of why these issues matter to families, to small businesses, to the Chamber, to everybody in this room. It's not something you hear the media talking a lot about, but let me just tell you a little bit about some trends that are going on in our state. I know some of you aren't from here, and those of you who are, you know this. Florida, in terms of a state, if Florida was a nation, if we were a country, our economy, we're a $754 billion economy, we would have the 19th largest economy on the planet. And we're growing. We're going to pass New York this year in population. We'll be the third largest state in the country. By 2030, right, 16 years, we're going to add 6 million more residents to our state. So we're adding another roughly 400 to 500 people a day right now in Florida again. So Florida's back on the growth path, 6 million more people by 2030. I challenge you to find another growth market anywhere in the world that provides as much opportunity as Florida provides over the next 14 years. If I could buy stock in this company called Florida, I'd do it. I wish I could. And there are some risks in what I just said, and I'm going to talk about that before I turn it over to Mark Delegal in just a few minutes. We're going to talk a little bit during this panel about one of the most embarrassing items that Florida has to deal with is our litigation system. As I travel around the country and even internationally, we were out at California for a fundraiser we did just recently. We were in Singapore in September. Whether it's halfway across the country, all the way across the country, or halfway around the world, people want to talk about Florida. They're concerned on the political risk of the election this year, but they're also talking about our lawsuit abuse system here in Florida. We had a trade mission to Spain last year, and in Spain, business leaders were talking about bad faith, and they were talking about why they wouldn't come to Florida because of our tort system here. So when site selectors and economic developers are starting to look at our legal reform system, it's something that we have to take seriously. And I want to also thank William Large, who's right over here. When the Chamber started the Justice Reform Institute several years ago, we had envisioned that we would all be able to focus on this, primarily in the elections and also in the legislative process. We've had tremendous success. The problem is Florida's legal system is so broken, we're ranked number 41. We have the 41st worst legal system in America. And the problem is we've done a lot, but there's so much left to do. And I invite you to work with us to move that ball forward as well. Let me also say, because I don't know if I'll have another opportunity to address all of you together in one place before the election this fall, I'm quite confident that as the trial lawyer runs for governor, I am quite confident that the business community and the insurance industry is going to be dragged through the mud as the problem. And we're going to do our best to make sure everyone understands that free enterprise and job creation and people like you who take risks, you're actually what's right with this country. And the insurance industry plays a major role in Florida's economy. And I want to share with you, I know most of you are in the industry, but you may not stop and think about the significance your industry brings to Florida's economy. So let me just share a few statistics our foundation gave to me just yesterday. So if you think about all of the people that you employ, all of the taxes that you pay, the benefits that you provide to Florida, almost 200,000 people, 193,000 people are directly employed by the insurance industry in this state. That's significant. $18 billion in gross domestic product. Remember I said we're a $754 billion economy in Florida? And most of that's small business, by the way. But $18 billion of that comes from you. You paid almost $750 million in taxes in 2012. Okay? Significant contributors to Florida's economy. And I wanted to acknowledge that's not only why we have some of you on our board of directors, but it's also why you're engaged in local chambers of commerce, you're engaged in what we're doing on a state level. And I, for one, at least wanted to acknowledge that before the campaign heats up, because I think that what's going to be called into question is the future of our state. Do we want to side with free enterprise, or do we want to side with more regulations and bigger government? And folks, those aren't just words. I really think that's what this next election is going to be all about. Let me take a couple minutes and thank some of our sponsors and also tell you about who some of the speakers are going to be as we go forward. And then I want to say just a few words about risk, and then I'll turn it over to Mark Delegal, and we'll get the program moving forward. So I want to please help me acknowledge, I'm going to list our sponsors, and then I'd like to give them a round of applause after I mention them. But for those of you who have stepped up and sponsored year after year, please know from my chair, we just could not put this conference on. We couldn't do what we do without the sponsorships. And so let me list some of our title sponsors. The National Association of Mutual Insurance Companies, Holland & Knight, Florida Association of Insurance Agents, FSU's College of Business, Florida Catastrophic Storm Risk Management Center, State Farm, Renaissance Re, and AIR Worldwide. Those are our title sponsors. Would you join me in thanking them, please? Also, the reception last night was sponsored by the Personal Insurance Federation of Florida, and we appreciate that as well. And in addition to last night's sponsorship, I'd like to tell you about our gold level sponsors that have made this possible as well. Thomas Howell Ferguson, the Association of Bermuda Insurers and Reinsurers, the Florida Association of Realtors, Pinnacle Actuarial Resources, the Committee of Florida Agents, National Mortgage Insurance Corporation, and UF Health. So thank you very much as well to our gold sponsors. And finally, I'd like to thank, in addition, Hill & Knowlton for their sponsorship, William Large, the Florida Justice Reform Institute, thank you for your leadership and sponsorship, and of course, Steve Weinstein and the Renaissance Re team. Not only are they gold sponsors, but they're also sponsoring tonight's event at Epcot. So I want to thank you very much for the sponsors and for the speakers that have made the trip. I'm going to turn it over to Mark Delegal in just a minute, but as Chamber President, I want to give you another perspective that I have, and I want to talk about risk for just a few minutes. And I want to differentiate here. There are two kinds of risks that I'm concerned about right now in Florida. One is what I would call natural risks, and that's what this conference, this summit's about. When we're talking about property insurance and health insurance and workers' comp, we can have a policy conversation about what's the right policy. How do we make Florida more stable? How do we make Florida more competitive? How do we grow business in Florida? That's what this conference is about. But I'll tell you, I've been doing this now for 16 years, and I've done everything from run our political operation to our lobbying team. And I'll tell you what, we have a man-made risk that is looking at us with the elections coming this fall. And that's not what this conference is about. But our next conference, when we're all back together again, will be after the election. And so this may be my last opportunity with all of you in one room together to just say a word about the importance of when we leave here tomorrow, the importance of every one of you engaging. Work with us. Talk with your employees. There is nothing wrong with talking to our employees about the significance of the choices that they get to make this fall. And there's going to be a few people that are here at the conference that are on our team that I want to invite you to talk to. David Hart, who I think many of you know is our Executive Vice President. David was Jeb Bush's political director and has run statewide campaigns before. David's here. Talk with him about what you're hearing, what you know, how you want to be involved. Marion Johnson, who is the guru of Florida politics. I'm no dummy. I put her office right next to mine, okay? And so when she's doing polling, when people call, it's a full-time conversation. Marion's run more statewide campaigns than anybody that I know. She used to be the political director at the Republican Party. She'll be here, and you're going to hear a presentation from her tomorrow on Florida's changing demographics, the changing voter profile, and what we're going to be doing on micro-targeting. And I encourage you to meet with her, talk with her, find ways that you can engage. Mike Grissom, the other teammate of ours on our political team, many of you may know Mike. Mike, after Governor Scott was elected, Mike ran the Republican Party of Florida for the last 3 years, and Marion hired him a couple months back to come join our political team to help run our campaigns. And I say that to say we do not intend to lose this race. We do not intend to be sitting in front of you a year from now at this conference, starting out with hard drinks early in the morning. The problem we have in front of us is if you look at the voter trends in Florida, we have 500,000 more Democrats than Republicans. We just went over 3 million voters who are independents. And it doesn't matter what number or letter is behind somebody's name these days. It matters what they stand for. And in this particular case, there couldn't be a bigger difference. And I say that to say we're not going to get to talk about this again as a group. And so I wanted to go off script, if you will, as Chamber President, and share with you that the policy discussion we're going to have over the next 24 hours or so is extremely important, because we have to be able to have a long-term vision that's backed up by action. But in Florida's case, we also have this man-made risk. It's the reason some of you have heard about this pot amendment, this marijuana amendment that the trial lawyers have invested millions of dollars in. We're at the Supreme Court now trying to get that thrown off the ballot. We think it's incredibly misleading. But if you're not from Florida and you haven't followed this, the reason that the largest plaintiff trial lawyer in Florida would invest millions of dollars in trying to legalize marijuana isn't because it's a good policy. It's very simple. Whoever wins this governor's race is going to appoint at least 3 Supreme Court justices in Florida. It's an incredibly good investment if you're a trial lawyer. Beyond that, and Marianne will probably talk about this tomorrow, if you want to talk about voter turnout and what causes people to turn out, think of it this way. In a presidential year in Florida, we have about 68 or 70% voter turnout. In a non-presidential year like this one, you're looking at 45 to 49%, depending on what turnout model you use, right? This pot amendment is incredibly popular with the 18 to 24-year-old crowd. There's 400,000 registered voters in Florida between 18 and 24. Rick Scott won the last election by 61,000 votes. If you were trying to get a trial lawyer elected governor, you would make a couple $1 million investment to try to get a particular group of people to come out and vote for an amendment that candidate supports. We're doing everything we can to make sure the voters know that this is a misleading amendment. We hope the court does the right thing. Hope that they will. But in the final analysis, this is a big deal. How Florida goes, the country goes. I think we're the last best hope for our country. And I appreciate you listening to me for a couple of minutes on that. It's what we're all about, and we appreciate you supporting us to be able to do that. So I'm going to bring our attention back now to the policy of moving Florida forward and securing Florida's future. Again, I want to thank the sponsors and the board members and all of you for being here. I want to introduce somebody who's been a teammate of ours who really doesn't need an introduction. Mark Delagal has been in more battles with us over the years than almost anybody has. Mark's now with Holland at Night, and I think everybody here knows that Mark has a command of this. So, Mark, I'm going to introduce you to come up and move our program forward. Thank you for your support.